Okay, so here's some lateral thinking that's perhaps not quite as lateral as a high school football play, but a little more lateral than my VR golf plays. I don't think I have that uploaded yet, the lateral thinking as displayed through VR golf. But if you're looking at this because I recommended it for like a resume thing of here's how I think in terms of like programming and making things maintainable, I think that's a more kinesthetic, visual kinesthetic representation of lateral thinking of like how can I break things to make to achieve an interesting goal. Yes, VR golf. You can tell a lot about a man by the way that he plays golf. Regardless, so I got the console working. So the whole thing is you probably saw me there when like I hit the configuration and I like hit something with opening up VS Code, and that's why it kept going. The thing that I needed to do is with start debugging is using Node, and the reason nothing showed up here is because I'm not in the console itself. We have the same problem that I mentioned before, but I did not go through and fix. Oh my gosh, it's unprofessional. No, I'm being real. I'm showing like active on the spot thinking. That's another thing with copy pasting stuff is if you copy paste mistakes, then those same mistakes are going to be there. Regardless, that should be fine because everything's 100 because I had the exam as 91, so the exam was at the threshold for greater than or equal to. Again, being very clear, you don't have to do the mental add 1 with more than. What you see is what you get. If it's 91, then you're in this tier. If it's 76, then you're in this tier. Except you have the and here, which we're going to go through. So I did the example of adding a fourth item on here. My gosh, that thunder is quite the thing, huh? So it all responds as expected, and I have. What did I do to this guy to get him to 90 instead of? So let's take project 2 down and say, well, the threshold is 11, so let's just drop them to 10, and they should drop to 90 for project 2, just to make sure that works. Things similar to before. Again, this is not comprehensive testing or whatever, but yep, as expected. What you see is what you get. If it's not 11, then it does not hit that threshold. So it's this is, I think, is much better organized in terms of making things consistent. If things are consistent in your code, yeah, we're repeating things with doing this over and over again. Where I'm sure that there's a way to like iterate through stuff so that for each thing here, I wouldn't have to do like a long if-else statement for each one. I mean, I kind of have to do because there might be different exceptions for like how do you do the comparison because it's different. I'm sure there's some way to do that, but that really doesn't matter. And this is readable, unless there was some reason to refactor it in that way. I wouldn't worry about it too much, especially for like getting something functional. And that's something that refactoring to, oh, you're repeating yourself, so that's not a good coding practice. You'd want to have, you'd want to have something where, okay, so we're incrementing up by 1 each time. We could still have all our things listed out here, but for making this, I would have something where I do like a variable call where it'd be like tier, and then I would have, whatever our variable would be, and then we'd increment this up as we loop over it. But I'm not doing that right now. That's something that you might do for a code review, and if it were like absolutely essential to like, we need to clean this up because this is too many lines of code, then that would be like a suggestion that I would bring up. But I mean, caveat is we have the different operands here. Operators, no, operands are the things that are on either side of the operator, regardless. Let's say that, so we have our, we added the fourth tier. So who got a 60? It's project 4. Should project 4 get a 60? Because they only had 1. Yeah, because they didn't have the and, so they got caught from here. Because project 4 only has the 1 item, only has the 1 project. So even though they had a high-ish score, we have the and that's there. So if I put or for that, then since project 4 has 77 on the exam, then, so what's tier 3? Oh, they got over that, and we put it for or. Then if I run it again, then project 4, or person 4, should have 75. Yep, and that's true. Even though they only had one project there because we changed it from and to or. I'm going to change that back. And I'm going to run that again. See where are we at. Was there something funny that was happening there? No. And we expect project 5 and project 6 to fail because they are both really low, but that one has 2, but it's not, it has to be and. So let's say that we added the low one to catch things. Well, if they did at least one project or got at least a 41 on the exam, then that's passing. Oh, we're doing really low standards now. Well, let's see if this makes sense with our last couple of guys running. So should we expect? Yeah, because they did one project. Let's say that you have, well, let's go with edge case. Let's say that this guy is bare minimum. For 41 and 0 projects, exam 5, when I run this again, project, I said project? I said project for all of these. It should be like student, but regardless, I can find and replace, but in all honesty, I'm going to do my alt-click trick again, just because I like it so much. And you see how like clicking with the mouse is absolutely a mess. So, I mean, it's not that much to think. Okay, student, because this represents a student. It's fine in terms of times and all this. And if I wanted to, do it like that, and that's just some like quick mass editing. Start debugging, and that should catch everyone because this guy is bare minimum, didn't do any projects. This guy has at least one project, and I did the or there. So yeah, that should be right. But as soon as I drop it to 40, that 1 point makes a world of difference, and student 5 should fail. Yes. Okay. So we got that happening there. So as you can see, debugging things, having a debugger, having it set up properly, really helps you to go through a bunch of cases that you make on your own. Of course, this is much more comprehensive than what you would have just on the CodeWars environment itself. I did explain this a bit for how I would structure this to be maintainable and scalable, and I even expanded to add a 4th tier and kind of go through that. So I do want to, these are like some end notes here, is I thought about doing the thresholds of just having like each one of these in its own array going down, but like, okay, here's the array of the thresholds, and then like each tier would be based off of the index that's there. So I would just get the first index for like tier 1. I would get the first index of each of these arrays. It just made more sense to put it into a dictionary format here, a key value kind of format. Again, I know it's an object in JavaScript terms, but also it just makes more sense as a dictionary, because like so many things are objects is such vague terminology. And yeah, if I had someone who was more skilled that could correct me on the correct use of terminology, that would make sense. But this is a dictionary format. I see this key value pair thing. That's a dictionary. Oh my gosh, that's Python terms, whatever. So I thought through doing it like this, but that adds like unnecessary complexity, where it makes sense to have. So here's why object-oriented programming makes sense. If I were doing like a traditional object like language thing, I could define an object, and I'm not going to do it here because I don't have it perfectly memorized. I have it in haven't memorized the correct syntax for doing object stuff because I've just been doing programming mostly focusing on, you know, conditionals and all this and using the proper operators and all of that. But so each of these is an object. Like, so I would have my template for the object. That would be like, I'm not going to do it because I don't know the syntax off the top of my head. I'm just gonna talk through it because this is going to be a very brief thing. So like each of these would be an instance of an object that has this skeleton to it, where I would define, I would just set these properties. So it'd be like tier 1 dot final grade equals 100. So I'd do it like that for setting things. If after I had a new object made, in this situation, it's just faster to, or whatever, because it's so limited, it makes sense to do this. The big benefit of if I had a template going on there, then I could iterate over creating these much faster. If I had, like, you know, a mathematical relation that I could do between these, like if it was a regular distance between them, it would be very easy to do. You could do irregular distances as well and write the logic for that. I could absolutely write the logic for creating a series of objects based off of a template, creating a series of instances of an object based off of that template to get these values to populate with it. I'm not going to dick around with those, with that logic, or like just to prove a point with it, because I'm not going to learn anything particularly strong from it. This is a more straightforward demonstration of, like, actually because this is going to be the data that's there, and when you have that's a danger of having, like, obscure ass functions, which is another thing that you can get lost in if you're doing CodeWars, is that everyone wants to have a one-line solution, and that's like, oh, that's really clever, that looks, you know, clean and all of this, but it gets obscure where you don't know what the hell is going on. So it's really hard to maintain. And if I have, like, a whole bunch of obscure ass calculations, then it's, like, really hard to go into, okay, so where's tier 3? We're moving the threshold from 50 up to 70. And then there, I have it there. I don't have to, like, dick around through whatever weird-ass calculation is going on to make that. So sometimes it's appropriate to use object-oriented programming, especially. I don't know the whole argument for why is object-oriented programming a bad thing, or why is it the savior of the universe. Because I've heard people vaguely say stuff, but a lot of people are just bloviating and emotional and don't know how to make solid arguments. And so as someone who's not super into the nuances of those arguments, I just haven't been exposed to any good arguments on either side that have made an impression as to why is object-oriented programming a wonderful thing. Like, I can see, like, you have templates and you can populate the data regularly. That's really simple as a way of explaining, like, why are objects a good thing, or are they useful? Here it's simple enough that it just doesn't warrant it. It just doesn't warrant making an object. Not for this project. Again, with scalability, then your mileage may vary. I don't have any, like, internal. Well, I guess I could have this whole function. I could extract this out, and then I would have this function as something that would be within the object, where each one would be, I'd be able to calculate the final grade, because each tier would have these properties here. Yeah. So, I mean, you could take this whole thing and put it into an object, and this would be a method within that. Because when a function becomes part of an object, then it's referred to as a method for it. Like a method for, it'd be like calculate final score for, you know, I don't know, it'd be like, you know, students. I don't know what I would call the object to be more specific. Like, I would have to have more specific things. This makes sense in this case of just having this as a function for, like, what we're trying to accomplish, which is we're trying to calculate something. We're trying to calculate something with limited parameters, and so I'm staying within that. I'm trying not to speculate about expanding on things too much, because that's great it's a double-edged sword. It's great in one sense because it helps you look at other things, and it helps you, like, get a sense of how can you broaden your horizons and learn more things? But also, if it's something where like I don't have structure behind, I don't have the answers to it, so I could fuck around for a very long time with something and not learn anything from it, that's a bloody waste. So don't go too far down rabbit holes. Don't try to do things that you don't know how to do. That sounds like really discouraging, but that's absolutely where I've burnt out a lot of fuel, is trying to do things that I don't know how to do and that I don't have any solutions for. So I spent a very long time just wasting on trying to be creative when I don't have the capability to do it yet. And I've already ranted enough about that. The other thing that I did is I was going to have the threshold things. So you can see how I went from putting the thresholds in their own arrays, and then going, well, that structure doesn't work. So an important thing about how do you make an effective maintainable program is thinking about the structures, the data structures that you're using. How would I have the arrays arranged? And it's like, okay, well, let's take each zero indexed item and then put that into its own tier, because that's the data that's going to be related to it. And this is more thinking like object-oriented things. What is a thing that I need? A set of information that is going to appear together, and then you translate that into objects. So this is an argument kind of for object-oriented program. I mean, this is literally an object, so this is a program that's functioning around objects. And I mean, this is how this notation is how you reference things within an object, like in other programming languages, except if it was an object proper, then I would want a capital just because of naming conventions there. But to me, this is a dictionary, because I'm not like saying, I'm not saying like object tier 1, or object tier, is, you know, has this name for it, or object here has this property, that property, and the other property. We're not going to do that, and I'm jumping back and forth. So yes, I'm getting all like cotton mouth and tongue tied over here, but this is actually object reference notation. I don't know the specific term for that. This is an object. It's being referenced with the dot notation here, dot whatever, to get the property from that. Yes, these are properties of. These are properties of this code block being an object that's assigned to this variable. I may be freaking up the terminology there. But that's another thing that I worry about when I'm recording things, like, oh, is this like the correct terminology? Because I don't have someone to like correct me if I'm saying something wrong. It's like I know how these are used if I'm not using the correct word. It's like when I'm doing sign language. It's like I know that I signed the correct thing, but if I'm doing SIMCOM, simultaneous communication, or I'm speaking at the same time that I'm signing, it happens all the time where I'm not saying something that I'm doing correctly. It's like I know I signed that correctly. I'm just speaking at the same time, so I'm using a different part of my brain that's not related to like what I am doing with the calculations here. Or the calculations are correct and I understand it, and then like me describing it, I could flub over, well, that's not the correct name for that, so you're not going to get this job. No one's going to say that, because like screwing up on saying, oh, this is an array. Well, no, it's not an array. But I could like mess that up and saying, yeah, this array of values here, like where I access it through this key to get 90 on this. So, you know, tier 2 dot exam threshold would, or for this one exam, for example, tier 2 dot exam threshold would give me 76. But if I said array there, it's like, oh, well, that's not a deal breaker. But it does bother me that when I'm recording, that I don't have great confidence in me saying everything precisely correct all the time. And that's something where, yeah, there's a lot of anxiety behind trying to learn, because I don't have a positive, constructive correction in my learning environment. I just have nebulous worry that I'm doing it the wrong way. I'm not saying the right word. What matters at the end of the day, the great equalizer, and I'm going to keep calling it that, the great equalizer of coding is, does the crap run and do what it's supposed to? If you can demonstrate that, then screw terminology. Like I stumble over basic vocabulary words in the English language constantly. For as eloquent as I try to be, and as expansive as I have tried to make my vocabulary, trying to burgeon with the great overflowing of verdant, flowery language, I stumble over very simple things, and I even stutter a great amount. Yeah, that's a communication thing. At the end of the day, if you're able to, and none of it matters, the words don't matter at the end of the day. As long as you understand the principles behind coding, that's something that's very important. How can I do that? How can I do this in a way? How can I arrange this in a way where I can make it maintainable? What structure makes sense to use? Sometimes you got to scrap some structures. Go, well, I'm not going to commit to this because I can think of something better. This is starting to get complicated. Is there another way that I could arrange this so that it's easier to access the information or easier to update the information in that case? So those are some of the things to keep in mind when thinking, well, how do you think programmatically? How do you really build things and build progress? And I would hugely emphasize, don't get sucked down into little things too much. I have been here with worrying about, well, is that the correct thing to call it? Is this correctly a variable referencing an object? I mean, this whole thing is a declaration statement, and anything that's in brackets essentially is a code block. But bracket notation is also used for declaring dictionaries in Python, which is the best analog to what we're functionally doing here. So yeah, I realize in talking this, I have rubber duck debugged a couple more areas for things that I should look up about object-oriented programming and functional programming as well. I don't understand those terms as well as I would like. And my only introduction to people where I've asked, and this is a thing that sucks about asking human beings to communicate things, is sometimes people who are very proficient with using object-oriented programming are incapable at making an argument for why you should use object-oriented programming, even someone that's been in the field for years and years. And I was extremely discouraged when I went to a tech conference and I was asking around about, well, how do I get into this? Oh, just play around with Linux and you'll learn it. How do I what should I focus on for web development? Should I do object-oriented programming or whatever the heck? Say, oh yeah, object-oriented programming is great. You should learn it. Okay, why is it great? It's just really good, basically. I mean, it really sucks when people it's not that they're dumbing down language. It's that sometimes you talk to people and they just don't get anything across. And that gets really annoying, where at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to hammer away at reading books or whatever, and that's what I'm doing. Is I'm reading through certification prep courses, and I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot of technical things that I'm going to be memorizing through flashcards, and hopefully I'll make more progress with that, and hopefully I will make more code reviews in the near future, and hopefully this is going to be a milestone where I look back on this and go, well, yeah, I wasn't very confident then, but now I have a lot more skills, and look at how far I've come since then. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been insightful. And please leave a comment if there is anything that I should expand on, anything that I should correct about my misconceptions about things, or if you have an argument for a really concise thing for why object-oriented programming is a good thing, what approaches and mindsets you would have to programming. That'd be an interesting discussion to expand on, and hopefully be a little less dry than me going through code here, but I hope that I was able to make it interesting nevertheless. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a future episode. Goodbye.